My name's Al Roberts. I'm the director of the School of Public Policy at UMass Amherst, and it's a pleasure to join everyone for the panel. It's a particular pleasure to join my former colleagues from the School of Policy Studies at Queen's University. So I've just got one slide that's going to sort of outline the main points that I want to address. The big question we're thinking about is how the pandemic is going to change our approach to the field of public administration, how we think and do our research, and how we do our teaching. And what I would like to do is sort of broaden the question a little bit and suggest that the pandemic is actually one in a series of shocks in what is turning out to be a very turbulent start to this century. If we go at 2000, we've obviously had the wave of terrorism that was marked notably by the 9/11 attacks in the United States and also major terrorist attacks in other countries. And then we had the financial instability marked by the global financial crisis of 2007, 2008. Now we find ourselves in a public health emergency because of the pandemic. And we can see other shocks and stresses on the horizon. The wildfires and hurricanes of the last few weeks are reminding us that we are entering into a period in which global warming will become more of an issue. We're entering into a phase of climate crisis, to use the phrase used by California Governor Newsom last week. We can anticipate technological shocks, especially as technology begins to displace more jobs. We can predict geopolitical stresses as the place of the United States in world affairs shifts and other powers such as China take a more prominent place. And we can anticipate other demographic, other changes, including shifts in demography. But the point I want to make is that, as I said at the top, this is going to be a very turbulent few decades. And it has really upended conventional wisdom about the right way to govern. We started this millennium with a great deal of confidence that we had sorted it out, the sort of fundamental questions of how you ought to govern a country. President Bush in 2002, I believe, said there was a single sustainable formula for effective governance. That was the model of democratic free market democracy, as he said, and he was not the only one who thought there was one single sustainable formula. What we've learned already in this decade is that there is no single sustainable formula for governing. Even in the United States, the home of this free market liberal democratic model, we've seen successive administrations veer significantly away from the major elements of that model in response to one shock or another. And what we can see at play in contemporary politics in the US and many other countries is this vigorous and broad debate about what the role of government ought to be, and that has implications about the overall design or the overall architecture of government as well. Not just what it should do, but how it should do it. And so I think the proposition I'd like to advance is that we in the field of public administration are not as well prepared to think about these big questions as we ought to be. And that is to some degree because the field of public administration, morphing into the field of public management over the last generation, in some ways de-skilled. It deliberately and consciously ran down its capacity for thinking about these macro level questions about what the broad aims of government should be and how the overall architecture of government should be designed so that we accomplish the good things we want governments to do, and societies are resilient. So the first proposition I would like to advance is that in terms of both research and teaching, we ought to recover our skill in thinking about what I will call the macro level of public administration. Public management being an approach, I will argue, that was mainly focused on the middle or meso level of public administration. So we ought to recover our skill in thinking about questions of overall regime design, especially about top-level decision-making, executive decision-making, whether systems are built to assure that we have adequate foresight, that we are attentive to looming dangers and preparing for them, whether we're thinking adequately about the ways in which leaders engage in that sort of high-level formulation of strategies for dealing with emerging challenges, and whether we're building governmental systems and societies that are resilient in the face of multiple shocks. So, combining those 2 points together, I'm essentially arguing that we need to sort of raise our eyes up and take a higher level and a broader look at the structure and aims of government. The other argument I would make is that we need to broaden our temporal horizons. And one way to say that is to basically say we need to have a more of a historical sensibility. Too often our research looks back a few years. It doesn't look back decades. We don't take a very long view. And one of the difficulties, therefore, is that we don't see the ways in which the architecture of government shifts substantially over time. And we tend to be caught by surprise. If we took the long view, we wouldn't be surprised by financial crises or waves of terrorism or public health emergencies or even by climatic change or technological change. We would recognize all of these as familiar aspects of the challenges of governance. I would also argue, though, that we need to broaden our temporal horizons looking forward. We need to give people in the field license to engage in speculation about what the world might look like and how we should anticipate that. And right now, scholars especially don't have license to do that. Speculation about the future is not regarded as a form of creditable research. And then finally, I'd like to suggest that we need to develop a different sort of mentality about the way we think about governance. In the heyday of the neoliberal era, the late 1990s, 2000 or so, there was this notion that we would build a machine and it would sort of run itself. We would delegate to markets. Markets were essentially self-governing. The job of government was to contain and discipline itself and obey a few policy rules. And the world, therefore, would take care of itself. And clearly, as I say, we're in a more turbulent world, a more dangerous world in which a sense of vigilance and an awareness of the need to constantly adapt is going to be critically important. So we need to cultivate, I think, that sensibility in our students and also in our own research. So that's the main points I want to make. I will just point out that I do have a book that came out earlier this year called Strategies for Governing that sort of captures a lot of the points I was just describing. I also have a few other short pieces that are accessible through my website that make the same point, including I want to do a shout out for the journal Canadian Public Administration, which is going to have a short commentary, already has short commentaries by my colleagues up at Queen's. And I'll have a short commentary in it shortly that recaps the points I've just been making. So thank you very much, and I will turn it over to Andy, and I will stop sharing the screen.